What is up guys, Fi here, and today we're going to be looking at when to pick Vayne. And Vayne is probably the champion that I get requested to do videos about the most. That might have something to do with the fact that no matter if you're an AD main or if you're not, if you can play a Vayne or if you can't play Vayne, you're still going to pick her if she's available because everyone just insta-locks her. Now that is probably not the best logic to have behind picking her, so I'm going to run through when you would pick her and why you should pick her. So let's kick this off with the good stuff, shall we chaps? And the first thing is the current meta of ADs. So what I mean is, like, Vayne's weakest phase is her lane phase, right? So in theory, if you can come out of lane phase ahead, then you stand a pretty good chance of winning the game. The other things are that she can hard carry a game, and as we already said, her lane phase is actually okay. It's just very dependent on the matchup and your skill level. One of the really cool things is the better you are with her, the more you're going to win. And I personally really like having a champion where the more I put into her, the more I get out. So in theory, the more you play her, the more rewarding it's going to become and the better plays you can make. Of course, we can't mention Vayne without mentioning her insane late game, and she almost always wins a 1v1, which is a big part of that, because in a team fight, if someone dives onto you, then you almost always come out of that ahead. The final 2 points are kind of minor points, but for me, she's fun, you can make flashy plays, and those are things that I find interesting in a champion. So when we're looking at her weaknesses, and she does have some weaknesses, like the biggest thing is she can be bullied in lane and she can get behind, which makes her mid game kind of weak. As we said, you can kind of counteract that, but the thing you can't counteract is that she is really weak to AoE damage in team fights, and that's partly because of her short range. So what I mean is, like, when you're trying to fight someone, you have to be pretty close to do it, right? And if someone's throwing a lot of AoE spells out, like this mostly applies to mid lane, and you get clipped by them, it might not even be aimed at you, but it hits you and you're suddenly in a dangerous position. So talking of her position, she isn't as safe as other ADs. She has no abilities to do damage with, which means when you exit the fight for a little bit, you can't be doing any damage at all. You have to wait until you go back to auto attack, and she is one of the hardest AD carries to play. So overall, why then? Well, she's skill based, and personally I love that. Like, I love having a champion where the better you are with her, the more you're gonna win. It demoralizes the enemy team when you're ahead, and it sounds silly, but it's a really genuine thing. If you get ahead and a couple of kills on Vayne, then the whole enemy team starts fighting each other because they think they're gonna lose. She has an insane late game and she snowballs really hard, so if you get a few kills in lane, then you are gonna do a lot of damage. Finally, why not then? Well, she has short range, she's weak to AoE damage, and your positioning is really important. And there are only these 3 things, but they are really big 3 things to deal with. So now you have a good idea of what Vayne is good and what she's bad at, right? But now we're going to move on to the when to pick stuff. So we're going to move on to the supports that are good with her, the ADs, and the supports that are good against her. So the first thing to go over is just like in general, right? Vayne has a very double-sided lane depending on the matchup and your skill level. Now, if you have a good matchup and you're a good Vayne player as well, then you can comfortably bully and control your lane, and all you really need is a support to absorb some damage for you while you dish the damage out. Now on the other side of this, in bad matchups, or if you're not as comfortable with Vayne, then you're going to be on the back foot and you need someone who can just let you farm really. The Caitlyn matchup is a perfect example of this. So pre-6, it's a hard matchup. If you can trade well, you can actually win, but often she's just going to push the lane, you can't stop her, and then she's going to poke you. Now at level 6, this completely flips on its head. You can all in and you can beat her, but you do need a support who will let you farm early. So for supports, my recommendations would be Soraka and Nami for more defensive lanes, and Janna for actually team fights in easier lanes. Now Nautilus and Thresh are really good for kill lanes because they have some defensive skills and they also have some peel as well. So what is Vayne bad against? Like, what would you pick against a Vayne player, right? And there are 3 AD carries that come to mind. Now Draven, Ashe, and kind of Jinx as well. Now Draven is probably one of the best champions against Vayne because he can burst her before she does any damage, and she can't trade autos with you even with her tumble because you're just going to trade back more damage with your empowered Q. Now Ashe and Jinx are slightly different, right? These two just outrange Vayne. They can keep her on arm's length and they can poke her while she can't do anything. Now this is especially true in the lane phase, but even in team fights and getting later into the game, they're always going to get a few hits in before you can do anything just because they outrange you, and if they crit on those first few, then you are in deep poo. Now when we're actually talking about the lane phase, it's the support that makes your life really difficult, and these three can make your life hell. So Annie is kind of self-explanatory. You can just burst Vayne almost 100 to 0 before she can do anything at all. Now Sona is another one and a little bit different. Like, she has a lot of damage with her poke, but she also has some pretty good heals as well, and either way it's no fun at all. She's either going to poke you down so you're too low to fight, or she's going to heal up all the poke that you deliver and make it just non-factor. The final thing is Janna, and it's kind of similar to Sona, right, in that she shields your silver bolts proc or tumble, and she makes trading pointless because you actually get no real damage onto them. There is also another side, so when you try and all in someone against Janna, then she's just going to tornado you and ultimate you away when you try and fight, and it is really frustrating. So moving on to the kind of comps that Vayne fits into, and actually honestly Vayne fits into most comps. There may be like better picks, but in solo queue there are already many times that Vayne will be a bad pick. So in general, you take a little bit of time to get your damage out, so you need to just have anything that gives you that time to kill everything. In top lane, these are going to be things like Shen, Wukong, Irelia, Hecarim, anything that takes a while to kill and can distract the enemy. The same is actually for the jungle, like Shyvana, Gragas, Rek'Sai, Vi, anything that dives in and keeps the enemy mid laner busy. Now a side note here is that for the top and jungle and actually mid, Kayle is the best champion ever to pair a Vayne with. Finally, in the mid lane, we're looking at things like Orianna, Lux, Victor, Azir, things that stay at the back and they stay next to Vayne so that they can help them get through the front line of the team. Let's move on to the things that if you see on the enemy team, you might not want to pick Vayne. So because of Vayne's short range and her lack of abilities that deal damage, AoE damage and burst are really good against her. The only other major thing to watch out for is something that can dive onto you, lock you down and kill you quite quickly. So in the top lane, these are things like Irelia, Wukong, Rumble. In the jungle, it's things like Vi and Rengar. In mid lane, it's more of these pokey champions that can deal a lot of AoE damage. So things like Ahri, Victor, Xerath, Annie. Like, these things have a lot of damage in a short space of time, which is what you want to avoid. So hopefully you enjoyed the video, and yes, next week I am actually going to do an in-depth Vayne guide, which you guys have been asking for all the time. As always, I really want to know what you guys think, so make sure you leave your comments down below about Vayne, and I'll catch you in my next video.